Welcome back to The World is Storytelling, and welcome to The World is Storytelling, David.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, you're someone who, when I think of you, bringing together, quite actually where we are now, we're in a space where nature, we're in a little church garden, but also connects with the I don't know, some people say the financial centre of the world, the richest place per square inch, the City of London. And I think of you as someone who kind of connects the financial side of the systems that we're in with the environmental and conservation sides of where we are. So how do you straddle that line? And do you have any little anecdotes that you can share with us that illustrate this quite interesting path that you are on?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. And I think that one of the keys in considering finance and the environment is realizing that, as it was once said, the economy is the wholly owned subsidiary of the environment and not the other way around. Okay. And what that really means is that we have to recognize planetary boundaries, but we also need to recognize that we live in complex systems. And some of those we see around us in pretty amazing ways. A good example of this is the potential collapse in rainforests. And some people will think, well, when is the rainforest dead? When the last tree is cut down. But instead, if we think about that rainforest a little bit more like a carpet, if you have a beautiful carpet and you begin to cut that into little pieces, maybe 2 inches by 2 inches, what you're left with is a bunch of useless tatters rather than that initial tapestry. And so thinking in that way means that sometimes small destruction and things that divide can be particularly damaging. Another example I'd point to is recognizing that we are all part of this ecosystem and certain behaviors are not ones we can evaluate one for one. A great example, many years ago, one of the most legendary national parks in the world, Yellowstone in the United States, was one where the wolf population had essentially been driven to extinction. And what that resulted in was not only a overproliferation of elk and deer, but also then overgrazing, which had negative effects on the waterways, had negative effects on marine life in those waterways. And ultimately, it was the restoration of the wolves in the 1990s that brought that system back. So while the initial desire to remove them was one of protecting livestock, protecting other animals from them, what we realized was the system was a lot more complex than it looked upon face. And that's why now we talk about things like food webs. That's why we talk about ecosystems rather than just food pyramids, rather than just singular things. And I think in a financial way, we are at this point of maximum leverage in the system. We are a geological force. We move more than all the different rivers on Earth in terms of sediment, in terms of rocks. We also do a lot in terms of driving our fellow creatures extinct at a rate that is 100 to some say 10,000 times the background average. All of these are examples of how we are not only a force of nature, but one that needs to contemplate and consider the systems in which we live.
That's a very, very good overview, and I love that. We just had a little robin fly past us, which always makes me smile. They're strange little creatures, but they make themselves at home everywhere. Tell me, what brought you personally? Has there been a time when I speak to people and they say, there was a moment when I felt that I'm part of this ecosystem rather than a part. Has that ever happened to you? Have you woken up one day or, I don't know, in a flash of a hike somewhere and thought to yourself, wow, I'm part of this, we're not separate?
I think that being out in nature as I've grown up has increasingly taken on that role. And so I'm not sure there was a particular epiphany moment, although I certainly have had some really strong experiences out in the woods where I went to college up in northern Massachusetts, out in Yosemite in California, and certainly hiking up in the Swiss Alps. But I think it's really dawned on me over time, just the vitamin nature that we need, that real feeling that when we're outside, when we're in a green space, when we're surrounded by it, how it physiologically affects us. And there's been a number of great studies, a lot of great science on how these changes are manifesting in terms of our cortisol levels, our stress hormone, our overall mood. But I think more and more I feel a need to be around that greenery and to have connection with it. And I think that itself provides a really strong ethos for preservation and conservation.
It does. And, now we're in a time, we're in a very, very busy afternoon, for yourself and for me too. We're kind of running around, especially you. And this is an oasis of peace. Now, that you mentioned northern Massachusetts and going in the forest. Is there Is that the feeling that you get an oasis of peace with nature?
Yeah, I think it's about peace. And part of it is just psychologically as humans, and maybe I'm a little bit more sensitive than most, but whether it's loud sounds or overstimulation, we've had thousands and thousands of generations that have lived close to nature, that have lived as part of nature. We have really, as I like to say, we have really old hardware and we're running some really new software on it. And you can imagine how that looks if you take that example to its extreme. But for us, we are overstimulated in many places. And that stimulation may be exciting, enthralling, but it can also be draining. And I think that nature, we recognize a lot more. The sounds around us, the crunch beneath our feet, the bird or the animal that is in the forest with us. But I think there's also a bigness of the area and a smallness of us that sometimes when we're racing around, we're very self-contained. And so it's both that mixture of the stimuli, but I think it's the perspective. And the two together, to me, really give you this feeling of awe, but also this feeling of peace.
Feeling of awe and feeling of peace. Oof. Describe that one space where you feel awe and peace at the same time. Because I'm thinking of... I was once in the Appalachians, the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. I was doing some hiking trail building and used to go to this little spot where you just looked out and saw the smokiness of the blue mountains. And on the one hand, you felt awe-inspired. On the other hand, you felt supreme peace. So describe to me what you're thinking of when you think of awe and peace.
So there's a number of places that I absolutely love. Probably top on the list is the Grand Canyon. And there's few places that just have this irregular and multicolored geometry and geography that is overwhelming. And at the same time, I think there's a real element there of recognizing one's smallness because it is so literal and so all around you that thousands of feet below is this river that has created this canyon of hundreds of miles that is several miles wide. And you are totally swallowed up in it. And I think that there's something that is both irresistible about that feeling, but also one that puts you very much in the context of the universe. And there's, I would say, nothing like watching the sun go down and seeing the stars come up over the Grand Canyon. It's a really remarkable thing to be in that canyon with the moon and the stars above you in a night sky. And it almost is haunting, but at the same time, I think incredibly peaceful.
Wow. And I think on that note, the peace of the Grand Canyon as we look up through a canyon of glass and steel buildings in the city. Thank you so much, David, for coming on The World is Storytelling.
My pleasure, Ronni. Great to see you.
And that was The World is Storytelling with me, Ronni. To support The World is Storytelling, make sure to subscribe, rate, follow the podcast, buy the book, and get in touch. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.